Good afternoon, guys, and welcome back to Baldfather Bets. We'll do a quick recap of the college football semifinal game, the Orange Bowl last night, and then we will dive into tonight's game, the Cotton Bowl between Ohio State and Texas. So last night we were on Penn State plus the 2 for 5 units. Obviously that didn't hit. Looked good early. Penn State really controlled the ground game throughout the whole game. Rushed for over 200 yards. If you'd have told me before the game Penn State will win the turnover battle 2-1, they will rush for over 200 yards and keep Notre Dame's rushing attack at 100 and some change, I would have thought for sure we won. But Penn State could not do anything through the air. So what we talked about yesterday with Penn State wide receiver core just not being able to actually kind of go after some of the weaknesses that Notre Dame had in the secondary. That proved to be true. The wide receivers finished the game with that many catches. That's insane. This isn't a analysis channel or anything. We're looking at lines and picks, but for a program of Penn State's caliber to play a semifinal game, and they not have a wide receiver that can register a single catch, it's sad, honestly. It's sad. I was talking about with a friend earlier. Let's say Ohio State's wide receiver number 3 is Tate. If you put him on the Penn State team last night, they win that game. That's how bad Penn State's wide receivers were. So anyway, hats off to Notre Dame. They got it done. Riley Leonard really used his legs in the second half. Just bowling ball, wrecking ball, especially up the gut. Abdul Carter played very well, but outside of that, Penn State has a difficult time getting push on the defensive line, and by the end of the game, they're a little tired. So Penn State had multiple opportunities to get it done, did not get it done, and Notre Dame will now be in the national championship. So more on that after we know who they're playing. We'll obviously do some previews on that game, and then ultimately make the pick. Look ahead lines, by the way, would be Texas minus 2.5 or 3 against Notre Dame, and would be Ohio State minus 7 or 7.5 against Notre Dame. That's the current look ahead lines right now, but we are not there yet. So we are looking at the Cotton Bowl tonight, 7:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff. Line at 6 or 6.5 now. There were some 5.5s out there for a while. There has never been a 7. Nothing's gotten to 7. Books won't let that happen because they know the sharps would come in pretty hard if it hits 7. So we're at a 6 or a 6.5, depending on what book you get. Obviously, make sure you're always shopping around your lines, and make sure that you're getting the best price on those in terms of juice as well. Let's do the same thing we did yesterday for the game. Let's take a look at when each team is on offense and defense. So let's start with Ohio State on offense and Texas on defense. Ohio State on offense. Ohio State changed their defensive strategy after the first Oregon game, and Ohio State has changed their offensive strategy after the regular season. So after the loss to Michigan game, they have changed. So Chip Kelly is traditionally an inside zone scheme. So everything is predicated off the inside zone run. Then they build the pass off of that. They build play action off of that. He's always been a very quick pace scheme, quick pace play caller. Get to the line quickly, take a look at the line, look back, get a play call in, and then move. They've completely changed that up. So they've gone from inside zone to a power gap scheme with counter. One of the main reasons that they did this, I think, is a zone offensive line scheme. If you are having offensive line issues, or you're having to bring in someone on the offensive line maybe who isn't as experienced, which Ohio State had, injuries to 2 of their best offensive line players this year, Simmons and McLaughlin, and then they had to do that. A power scheme is, an offensive lineman doesn't have to think as much. They snap the ball and then they're moving ahead. It's a power scheme. They're using their overall size, skill, talent, and most of the time offensive linemen have that, especially if they're an offensive lineman at Ohio State. It's a little bit easier for them to run. It's one of the main reasons I think they went to it. A zone scheme requires a little bit more left and right movement, and it's a little bit more difficult to run. You have to be thinking more as an offensive lineman. Since they've moved to this gap scheme and then utilizing counter with it on like 50% of their plays against Tennessee and Oregon, they have been absolutely dominating. You can see it. Offensive line is getting off the ball quick, giving up no sacks in the playoff game so far. Howard's had a completely clean pocket. The counter has the defense is moving completely the wrong way. Henderson has running lanes. They've been using a pony package with Judkins and Henderson both in the backfield, then sending Smith in motion across. It's extremely difficult to deal with. I do not expect Ohio State to move away from what they've been doing the past 2 games. I do not expect them to go back to using inside zone. If they do and they lost the game, Day and Kelly would be completely crushed by everybody for overthinking it, which is what they've been crushed in the past 4 before. So I expect them to run that same scheme. Like I said, they've been utilizing Smith out of the slot a lot more, and they essentially say pick your poison. So they're going to have Smith in the slot. They're sending him in motion a lot more than they were before. Oftentimes they're putting Judkins and Henderson on the field at the same time. They put Egbuka out on the outside, and then oftentimes they put Tate out on the other side, and they say, okay, decide what you're going to do. Essentially, there is no defense in college football that can contend with those weapons. So the only thing you really can do is you have to try and make them uncomfortable at the line of scrimmage. So, for example, in Ohio State's, let's say, games where maybe they didn't reach their offensive potential, they scored 20 against Penn State, 21 against Nebraska, and 10 against Michigan. What those teams did is they really put the pressure on the offensive line, made life difficult for Howard. They didn't allow the Ohio State run game to get going. And what they did that by having 2 high and then creating that pressure at the offensive line with 4 down linemen. So that's what Texas is going to try and do here. So Texas is very apt at running a 2 high safety scheme. They're built in a 4-2-5 with 2 high safeties at the top. They're going to try and win early downs by having the defensive line win up front against Ohio State's offensive line, limit rushes by Judkins and Henderson to 1, 2, 3 yards rather than what they've been doing, and then keeping 2 high safeties back to deal with the overall weapons at the wide receiver position that Ohio State has. On top of that, then they're going to have to get to Howard several times, 5, 6 times probably throughout the game on 3rd down situations where Texas has a very good NASCAR package on 3rd down situations, but you have to earn the right to rush the passer, right? One of the reasons Howard has had a completely clean pocket and has 0 sacks in these past 2 games is they're not really even getting to 3rd and long situations. It's 1st and 10, then it's 2nd and 3, then it's 1st and 10, then it's 2nd and 4, then it's 3rd and 1, then it's 1st and 10. Like they're not getting into situations where, okay, we can dial up and have a pass rush going. You know, people make a lot of the fact that they went up against James Pierce Jr. and he didn't have any sacks. He really didn't have any opportunities because the Ohio State offense just completely torched that defense from the get-go. Texas's defense is much better than Tennessee's and Oregon. So Oregon's defense just flat out isn't good. Tennessee has a really good defensive line, but they had no secondary that could really hold up. And then beyond the defensive line, they weren't quite as deep. So they have good first 4 or 5 players, but then when you start to rotate out, they don't have the same depth. Texas doesn't necessarily have a weakness in the defense. The defensive tackles aren't quite as good as they were last year, but they have more depth at the defensive tackle position than they had last year. So if you were to say they have a weakness at one corner spot in Muhammad. That is where you saw Clemson target a lot in the first playoff game, and Clemson scored 24 points on them. And that's where you've seen teams in the SEC target in the past. Georgia targeted him quite a bit as well. You can get him to bite on double moves, and you're going to see Ohio State target that as well with whoever he is on. Texas is going to play more zone than man, so you're not going to see as much, hey, who's going to be shadowing Smith? I don't think Texas has any notions that they have any one player who can really cover Smith. You're going to see him in zone a lot. And when you do see him in man, you're going to see safety, coverage over the top for Smith. Probably leaving a lot of one-on-ones for Egbuka against Jahdae Barron, who's the Thorpe Award winner. But one-on-one, even though he's the Thorpe Award winner, probably still has no answer for Smith. So that's mainly what it's going to look like when Ohio State has the ball and Texas is on defense. No real reason for Ohio State to change up what they've been doing the past few games, and Texas is going to try and win with a 2 high safety look and 4 down linemen. If Texas can't win with a 2 high safety look and 4 down linemen, it's probably going to be a long day for Texas, because then they're going to have to start getting creative up front, which is going to leave less coverage on the back end, and that's really when you can see Smith, Egbuka, Henderson get going. One of the biggest things in this when Ohio State's on offense is big plays. So Ohio State it's not like they've been methodically driving down the field in these past 2 games. They're just hitting big play after big play after big play after big play. And that's been kind of crushing their opponents, especially crushing them early. So, how many explosive plays, 20-yard plus, 25-yard, 30-yard plus plays does Ohio State hit in that game? This game is going to have a lot in terms of how the outcome ends up happening. Anyway, now let's move to Texas on offense, Ohio State on defense. So I said Ohio State changed their offense after the Michigan game, and they changed their defense after the first Oregon game. Before the first Oregon game, Ohio State was essentially running single high deep safety, and then trying to keep everything in front of them, and essentially saying our players are better than yours. They're not. If when we're aggressive, we're going to blitz and we're going to keep everything in front of us. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that Downs was new into the system. It didn't work against Oregon, and they changed things up. So they went to something that Knowles has done before. So it's a 3 high safety look. They do it a little bit different, and I'll explain what they do differently. It's due to Downs' versatility. It was invented in the Big 12 like 8 or 9 years ago, actually at Oklahoma State, and then it kind of went across the Big 12 because the Big 12 didn't have the caliber of defensive players that they needed in order to try and slow down some of the offensive. Big 12 was putting a lot of quarterbacks, wide receivers, et cetera, in the NFL, and hardly any defenders in the NFL. So they needed to do something different to try and slow them down. So they went to this 3 high safety look. There's not a lot of beaters built into offenses for it because it's only been around for like 8 or 9 years. Knowles ran it a lot at Oklahoma State in 2021 because Gundy essentially told him, you need to do this. And then from that, he's incorporated it a lot in his systems now moving forward. So they're running this 3 high look, but what they're doing is they're doing it with an inverted triangle. So they have the 2 high safeties up here, and then Downs is that 3rd safety, but he's playing a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. So he's playing like 10 to 12 yards back from the line of scrimmage. And the reason they can do that is because he's so versatile. So you hear other teams where they say, okay, we're going to bring in this guy more as a bigger body, play him closer to the line to stop the run. And then when we're in passing sets, we're going to sub him out and we're going to bring in this guy. Ohio State doesn't have to do that because Downs can do everything. So he's that versatile, he's that generational of a player. But that's why they've been so difficult really to go against, because one of the things that 3 high safety look does, it allows you to disguise whatever coverage you're in. I was shocked that Oregon, I don't know if they thought Ohio State was going to play them the same way, even though that they've been putting 3 high safety look on film for several weeks, if they thought they were going to revert back to the single high that they played them the first game. But I mean, they gave up 8 sacks, and a lot of those sacks you see Gabriel gets the ball, drops back, and then he's just completely confused by what the coverage is. You can tell they didn't really game plan the correct way, and a lot of that has to do with all the different looks that Knowles is able to do off of that 3 high. Their 4 down linemen have been winning. JT and Sawyer are probably playing the two past games that they played outside of JT's game against Penn State. That may be the best games they've ever played combined, the two of them together in their lives in a 2-game stretch at Ohio State. They're very good. They're not. Neither of them are probably first-round draft talents, but I mean they're day 2 draft talents for sure. They're very good. So they don't, probably same as Ohio State did on offense, they're not going to change much up on defense coming to this game because they don't really have any reason to. What you're going to see then from Texas. So one of the things you can do against a 3-high look, you have to go a little bit extreme, right? So what you can do is you can go 6 offensive linemen. So then that makes the defense have to commit to something, because if not, they're probably going to get blown off of the ball. So they can leave the same personnel in because Downs is so versatile, but they have to at least show you what their look is to try and defend with the 6 offensive linemen. Cameron Williams will be healthy tonight, along with Banks on the left tackle. So both Texas's first-round tackles next year's draft are healthy. And then Gooseby, who's been subbing in for each of those guys the past several weeks because essentially one of them's been hurt per game, you could bring him in to put him on the outside as the 6th offensive lineman, or you could go with 2 guards on the right side. So Texas's plays with 2 guards essentially on their right side. They're both considered starters, so you could just bring them both in. The other thing you can do is you can go 5 wide. So if you go 5 wide, that's another thing where, okay, Ohio State has to kind of come out of whatever it is that they're going to be disguising within their 3-high to make sure they're lined up correctly against the 5 wide. So then at least at the line, Quinn knows what the look is. I think you'll see some of that from Texas's side. The other thing here is on running the ball. So Texas is heavy outside boundary zone scheme. Ohio State is the number 1 defense in the country at defending the outside boundary zone run. So there's 2 things then that Texas can do. Texas can try and not do that. They can try and run inside more, which has not been something that they really tried to do all year. Or they can essentially abandon the run to start and look to only run later as the game goes on. I think they will do more of the latter, but in order for that to work, they're still going to have to rush for somewhere 80 to 100 yards. They're going to need it in certain situations, short yardage situations, tendency breakers. They're going to have to be able to get 3 to 4 to 5 yards per rush. If they're only running for 1 to 2 yards every time, it's going to be very, very difficult because Texas will be in obvious passing down situations, and then Knowles can kind of really go crazy with his coverage. A lot of people have talked about Ohio State's defensive line and ability to get sacks. It's exceptional. Like I said, I think 8 sacks against Oregon. I don't even remember how many they had against Tennessee, but it's significant. They have 47 sacks on the year. They haven't really done it against an offensive line with the tackles like Texas has. So Texas went up against Texas A&M this year, who has the number 1 and the number 2 ranked defensive ends for next year's draft. Like I said, Sawyer and JT they're not in that caliber, but they're very good. But if Ohio State isn't going to blitz, then you're really just looking at one-on-one matchups for the ends against the tackles, and can those tackles hold up? And Williams and Banks can. So if they're able to get a few yards at rush, they're able to get into less obvious passing down situations. Quinn has shown very capable this year when he has time. There's a reason he was the number 1 overall recruit in the country when he went to Ohio State as a 17-year-old, I think. And there's a reason that he's, high on people's draft boards still. So you're going to see both Ohio State on offense and defense essentially do what they've been doing. On defense, you're going to see Texas do what they've been doing. On offense, I think you're going to see Texas change it up a little bit and trying to go with extreme formations to get Ohio State to tip their hand. So 6 offensive linemen, 5 wides, but they are going to trust those tackles to hold up against JT and Jack. So if they can't hold up, then Ohio State will win for sure. If they can hold up, then Quinn can probably make a game out of it. So ultimately, what are we going with? This game, contrary to last night's game, is loaded with NFL talent. So between the 2 teams, there are 21 players which are projected as first 4-round picks in next year's draft. So 11 on Ohio State, 10 on Texas. That doesn't even include the fact that Ohio State has Caleb Downs and Smith, which will be top picks in the year after and the year after that's draft, and that Texas has Colin Simmons and Anthony Hill, which is the same thing, where they'll be, I think Hill is the number 1 rated linebacker for the 26 draft, and Colin Simmons is the number 1 rated edge rusher for the 27 draft right now. So the amount of NFL talent on these teams on both sides of the ball is absurd. These are significantly better teams than last night. Ohio State has been playing better as of late. So you have to kind of look at this in 2 different ways. If you look at a model which takes into account the full season sample size, this is way too many points. So my model has this at a 4.5 point game. I've seen other models which have this at a 1.5 point game. The look ahead line for Texas Ohio State before the Rose Bowl and before the Peach Bowl was Ohio State minus 1.5. That, I think, had a lot of it factored in the fact that they're playing in Dallas. If you take away the regular season and you do a model based off of the past 2 games, well, then my model has this at like an 8.5 point game. So it really depends on how you want to, do you want to factor in the full season when you're doing this, or do you really only want to look at how the teams are performing in their past couple of games? I am more of a full season guy. I like data, and I like, as you stack more data on top of each other. So if you're going to do that, then this is just simply too many points, and it's too many points by quite a bit. 6.5 is significant for a team at the caliber of Texas's level, even if they're going up against what's maybe the only roster that's better than them. It's still so many points. So we're going to take the 6.5 with Texas. It's a stronger read than last night. So last night was 5 units. This one's going to be 10 units. I think we're going to know pretty early on whether or not this has a chance to cover or not. Ohio State has been boat racing teams pretty early, and it's been out of the gate done. I think you'll actually see a hot start from Texas, and then it's going to be about, can they hang on? There's a very good chance that we could be looking at a halftime play in Ohio State. So Ohio State's the number 1 second half team in the country. Texas is one of the worst third quarter teams in college football. They get outscored in the third quarter like they're a high school team. It's pretty incredible actually to watch. So if you do see a kind of a surge from Texas early, you could have either some live opportunity on Ohio State or some second half opportunity on Ohio State. So be taking a look at that if you are a live bettor or if you are a second half bettor, especially if you start getting plus money on Ohio State to win this game. You may want to take that. So again, models. My model says that Texas should score somewhere between 17 and 24 points in this game. It's pretty consistent with when they've played 3 high safety defenses with talent in the past under Sark. And then my model says Ohio State should score between 20 and 31 points in this game. So I'm projecting anywhere between a Texas 4-point win to an Ohio State 14-point win, meaning that the sweet spot's right in that, 3 to 7 points. Ohio State wins by 3 to 7, and meaning that more considerably, Ohio State has a better chance to win. So if at any point in this game you're getting Ohio State at plus money to win the game, and it's still a game, obviously, they still have a chance, it's probably a decent bet. So anyway, that's it. Thank you guys for stopping in. Thank you guys for contributing to the channel. Really appreciate it. Please make sure you're subscribed, notifications on, like, share, comment this video, anything that you can do to help us with the YouTube algorithm, help us grow our subscriber base. I really appreciate that. So this is our second to last college football game of the season. Let's enjoy it. Everyone have a good time. Stay warm, stay safe out there, and hook 'em horns.